Picture yourself on a crowded street. Someone ahead of you collapses. Be honest about what happens in your head next. You look around, you check whether anyone else is moving, and some quiet part of you hopes somebody more qualified is about to step forward so you don't have to. There's a name for what you just imagined: the bystander effect. The more people watching, the less likely any single one of them helps. You've heard the story it comes from, even if you don't remember where. March 1964, New York City. A young woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked outside her apartment building. The New York Times reported 38 witnesses, 38 people who heard her, watched from their windows, and did nothing. That story is why you assume the crowd won't help you. It's also, in several important ways, wrong. 4 years after Genovese was killed, 2 psychologists decided to test the idea in a lab. John Darley and Latane sat people in a room to fill out a questionnaire, then quietly pumped smoke in under the door. Alone, most people got up and reported it within 2 minutes. Sitting with 2 strangers who had been told to stay calm and ignore it, most people said nothing at all, even as the room filled with haze. They ran it again with sound instead. A voice in the next room, someone apparently collapsing and calling for help. Alone, people rushed out. In a group, many sat still and listened. They called it diffusion of responsibility. If other people are there, some part of you assumes one of them will handle it. So you wait. When everyone waits, nobody moves. By 1981, Latane and Steve Nita had reviewed more than 50 of these studies in Psychological Bulletin and concluded the effect had withstood the tests of time and replication. Textbooks taught it. Kitty Genovese became the proof. If you have ever frozen in a crowd, this is the version of yourself you were handed. Not scared, not uncertain, just one more person who couldn't be bothered. Except the proof turned out not to be proof. In 2007, 3 researchers named Rachel Manning, Mark Levine, and Alan Collins went back to the original court records and case files rather than the newspaper account and published what they found in American Psychologist. It didn't match the story at all. No single witness saw the whole attack. Most heard fragments in the dark and had no clear idea what was happening. Several people did call the police. One neighbor came down the stairs, out into the night, and held Kitty Genovese in her arms while she died. 38 silent witnesses made a cleaner headline. It wasn't what happened, so the famous case at the heart of the bystander effect isn't a case of nobody helping. But one bad headline doesn't undo 50 laboratory studies. That still doesn't tell you whether the crowd would help you. Then somebody went back through the arithmetic. In 2008, a psychologist named Daniel Stalder at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater rechecked the calculations behind that landmark 1981 review, the one that declared the effect had survived every test. There was a mistake in the math. Corrected, the numbers said something different under one specific condition, when the bystanders can't see or hear each other, which is precisely the situation that night. Separate apartments, separate windows, nobody able to see who else was awake, who else was listening, who else had already picked up a phone. Under those conditions, the corrected data pointed the other way. More people meant help was more likely, not less. 2 cracks now in the 2 things everyone cites, but both are arguments about old evidence, and neither one tells you what happens on a real street. That still doesn't tell you whether the crowd would help you. So researchers stopped arguing about the old evidence and went to find new evidence. In 2011, a team led by Peter Fisher at the University of Regensburg pulled together decades of bystander research and separated out something the original studies had mostly skipped: real danger. When a situation is genuinely violent, rather than staged and ambiguous, the classic effect largely disappears. Then, in 2020, a team led by Richard Philpott, working across Lancaster University and the University of Copenhagen, got hold of something better than any laboratory: security camera footage. 219 real public conflicts filmed on real streets in Amsterdam, Cape Town, and Lancaster. In more than 90% of them, somebody stepped in. Rarely heroically. Often it was a person moving between 2 people arguing, a hand on a shoulder, pulling someone back, somebody standing close enough that things cooled down on their own. The more people who were present, the slightly more likely it was that someone acted. 3 separate lines of evidence pointing the same direction. Corrected math, a decade-spanning review, and cameras that don't know they're part of an experiment. That is finally an answer to the question. On a real street, in real trouble, the crowd is not what you were told it was. We shouldn't oversell it either. Those original experiments weren't wrong about everything. In small, murky situations where you genuinely can't tell whether anything is wrong, hesitation is real. You do glance around to read the room before acting. That part survives. What doesn't survive is the specific claim that made this famous. That in a real emergency, a crowd makes you less likely to be helped, which leaves one honest question. If it isn't selfishness, what is that feeling you get when you freeze? Brain scans offer a clue. Rude Hortensius and Beatrice de Gelder put people in a scanner and showed them emergencies, alone or with bystanders present. As the crowd grew, activity dropped in the exact regions that prepare your body to move and help. Something else took over instead, something closer to going still. You've inherited that. Every animal facing a threat has some version of it, and it's far older than any city street. Something dangerous appears, and the first instinct isn't to run or to fight. It's to freeze, and wait, and see. That reflex was built for a world where the wrong movement got you killed. It's still running now, in a body standing on a pavement, watching something go wrong, not yet sure what it's looking at. So go back to that crowded street. Someone collapses. You look around. That hesitation you feel is real, and now you know what it actually is. It isn't your character showing you something ugly. It's a reflex older than language, mistaking a crowd for a reason to hold still. Here is what the newest evidence says will happen next. Somebody moves. More than 9 times out of 10, somebody moves. And the more people standing on that street with you, the better those odds get. Kitty Genovese had neighbors who called for help. One of them held her so she wouldn't die alone. That was always the real story. If you're ever the one on the ground, the crowd is more likely to save you than to watch. And if you're ever the one standing there, frozen for a second before you move, that second wasn't cowardice. It was just something very old, checking whether it was safe.